Okay, let's talk about John. If my memory serves me correctly, I counted up the verses, and John chapter 18, let's see, he's got 40 verses, I think. 19's what, 42? 20 is, forgot how many is in 20. 25, no, 21's got 25 verses. How many verses in 20?
29.
How many?
31.
31. Okay. Anyway, if my math's right, that's 138 verses. And we got 12 times, and I wrote it down somewhere, but I don't remember where I wrote it. So we got to do at least 11.3 verses per week. Okay? I don't know if I can do that or not. Y'all know how I teach. I may get bogged down on one verse, but anyway, that's sort of our goal. I thought it'd be good for us to at least sort of have something to go by. Now, I want to do a little quick review. This is one of my favorite outlines, and let's look at it. It's like Alan. It's got all the P's and all that stuff in it. You know how he does in his sermons. The first part of John is called the prologue, and that starts in chapter 1, verse 1, and goes to 18. The second part has to do with public ministry. I want to do this. I know this is old news for a lot of you, but we got some newcomers, so I want to bring them up to date. The second part starts in 1:19 and goes to chapter 12, verse 50. And this is what's called the public ministry of Jesus. This is where Jesus is presenting himself to the public. He's doing signs. He is preaching. He's teaching. He's trying to get people to believe in him, as the Son of God. After all, that's what John's about, right? John 20, 30, 31. These signs are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. Okay, everybody with me now? The third part is the private ministry. And we started that in 13 and 1, and it goes through chapter 17. What's the last verse? 25? No, 26. And this is called the private ministry. Now, why is it called the private ministry? Who can tell me? Who remembers?
Just his disciples.
Okay, it's where Jesus is interacting just with his disciples. And so they go to the upper room in chapter 13. This is where they're going to observe the Passover. This is where the Lord institutes the Lord's Supper. And then this is where he tells Judas, what you're going to do quickly. Which is what? To betray him, correct? You remember the disciples thought that he was going out to buy food, for the feast. Now, a big question there is, what is the feast? Well, if they're observing the Passover, then what's the feast? Unleavened bread, which lasted a week, after the Passover, okay? All right. Now, in verse 31, I'm pretty sure it's 31. Check me on that, Terry. 13:31. 13:31. This is where he begins his farewell address. You got some red letters starting there, I'm sure. And what's that verse say? Say it, Terry.
Verse 31?
Yeah.
Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified
Okay.
in him.
This is where he begins his farewell address. Everybody follow me now? See, in the first part, this is where he does washing of the feet. You also remember that. You don't have it in John, but the background of this is in Luke chapter 22. This is where the record shows that the apostles were arguing with each other. And why were they arguing? Brother Howard, do you remember why were the disciples arguing? Do you remember that?
Who was going to be number one?
Yeah, who was number one? Who's the most important in the kingdom? And so with that background, Jesus washes the disciples' feet. And he says, if I'm your Lord and Master and I wash your feet, then what? You ought to be willing to do that to one another. Okay, so in 13:31, he begins his farewell address, and this goes all the way through chapter 17. Chapter 17 is a prayer, and this is where Jesus prays for himself, but his prayer for himself is a little different than our prayers. In our prayers, we frequently have a lot of requests, don't we? But Jesus didn't pray like that. Jesus basically says, you sent me to be glorified, for you to be glorified. And so what does that mean in John? You remember what I said, Larry?
I do not.
Glorification? Who does? All right, Gabe, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was stressed.
Oh. Don't go to any auctions. Okay, glorification in John has to do with his death and his burial and his resurrection. Okay, so what is Jesus praying for? Basically, Jesus is saying, you sent me to die for humanity, let's get on with it. It's just that's incredible to me. You know, he said, this is why I'm here, so let's do it. And then in 18, we have what is commonly called his arrest and trial. That's where we begin this quarter. Does that kind of help us bring us up to date a little bit? Now, in John, like his arrest and trial, and in 19 is his crucifixion, 20 is his resurrection, and 21 he restores Peter. But in each chapter, I identified something about Jesus, because that's what John's about, the whole book, okay? So John 1, you know, Jesus is the Word made flesh. John 2, he's the final authority. John 3, you know, he's the master teacher, and so forth and so on. So in John 18, I call this Jesus the composed one. The composed one. Now, why would I say that?
Because he's in charge.
All right, he's in charge. He's not hiding. You know, in the garden, there was a skeptic. Let's see, who was it? Either Celsus or Cerinthus, I can't remember right off. But he accused Jesus, you know, of hiding in the garden and all that hogwash and so forth. But throughout this chapter, I wanted to show you how Jesus is undaunted. He's not affected, you know, whatsoever. I mean, it's a very emotional thing, you know, that we find in the Garden of Eden. By the way, John doesn't have a garden, not Garden of Eden, Garden of Gethsemane. But John does not have a garden episode. The closest thing that comes to a garden episode is John chapter 12. Let me read that verse, you know, to you. It really stands out to me. John 12. And this is where he says in 27, my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour, but for this purpose I came to this hour. 28, Father, glorify me, glorify your name. So in 27, he's very troubled. So that's about the closest thing in John that we come to the Garden of Gethsemane. And you know, in the garden, he said, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Remember that? And so here he says, what shall I say? Save me from this hour? And then, I mean, the words barely get out of his mouth until he says what? This is the reason I came. Okay? All right. So maybe that helps a little bit. All right. Jesus, the composed one. Okay. So the arrest takes place 1 to 12. Now, a couple of things that we need to remember in this section of John. One thing has to do with his trials. John, unlike any of the other gospel writers, focuses a lot on the Roman trial. You don't have that Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so you have it in the Gospel of John. And so in John, you've got, after Jesus is arrested, we're going to find that he's taken to Annas, who is sort of the high priest emeritus. He was high priest for a long time, and 5 of his sons, maybe in Caiaphas is his son-in-law, and he's currently the high priest, okay? But, you know, he's sort of the guy, he's kind of like, you know, in an eldership sometimes, you'll have an elder that resigns, but he still is calling the shots behind the scenes. Y'all ever know of anything like that? You don't, Larry? I know of situations like that. Anyway, so Annas is, you know, he's the guy that they say, well, Caiaphas is a high priest, but maybe we need to see what Annas has to say, you know, about it first. So they go to Annas, and then they go to Caiaphas before dawn, and then Caiaphas after dawn. Okay? But then also you got the Roman trial, and you have him being seen, Jesus being seen and questioned by Pilate, and then what? Herod, and then what? Pilate again. Okay? So got to keep that in mind. Another thing in John that's kind of peculiar, I say peculiar, is John says that Jesus was crucified the 6th hour. Mark says that Jesus was crucified the 3rd hour. Now, skeptics will immediately say, wow, you got some kind of contradiction, here. So we want to try to straighten that out. There's not a contradiction because the Bible has no contradictions. You see, we may believe that there are alleged discrepancies, excuse me, but God has left it up to us to use our brains, to try to figure it out. And am I the only one burning up in here? Okay, I'm not. We have others. Jerry Wood's not in here, and he the head knocker of the air. Billy, you're a builder, aren't you? Go around there, and Nathan's going to check it for us. Nathan, you and Sarah are sort of flipping me out. Y'all used to be over here. You know how I feel about where you sit. I don't care where you sit, but I wish you'd land. Okay. Thank you, Natalie, for being in the same spot. Okay. All right. Now, so we ready? Does that help a little bit? All right. Now, let's look at 18:1. When Jesus had spoken these things, of course, these things refers to his prayer, and I think his whole farewell address. Was there anything around there, Nathan? Was there some kind of temperature thing? We're in that time of the year, aren't we? Okay. He went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Okay, now, here's the Kidron Valley. The Kidron Valley, during the wet season, had water running in it. Now, Linda and I crossed the Kidron Valley in, how long ago was that? About 6 years ago, 7, 8, maybe. But at any rate, and we were there December, January, I think it was. And we didn't see any water. It used to be very deep, but over the years, it's been hundreds of years, correct? It's sort of like Jacob's well. It used to be like 120 feet deep, John chapter 4, but it's not quite that deep anymore. Why is that? Because you got them dumb teenagers going around there. Boy, let's throw something in there and see how it sounds when it hits the bottom and all that. We've done that, haven't you? Did you ever do that, L.A.? Probably. Okay. All right. But at any rate, so the valley, for whatever reason, is not quite as deep, and apparently it doesn't run. Now, here's the thing that I find interesting about the Kidron Valley. It is used to be about 200 feet below the temple level. Okay, that tells you something about how deep it is. So here's Jesus and the apostles. They were in the upper room. And you remember in 14, I know you remember this, right? Because you have such good memories. In 14:31, he says, let us go from here. My conviction is at that time, they left the upper room. So 15, 16, and 17 is on the way to the Mount of Olives. All right? And that was about 4.5 hours. Now, the Passover meal was eaten when, Larry? What time of day did it start? I know you started in the evening. And so this would be what day? On our clock, it would be Thursday evening. But we're on Roman time. Roman time starts 12 midnight. Okay? This would be actually Friday morning Jewish time, because their day started, at like dusk. Okay? That's sort of weird, isn't it? But Jesus was still crucified when? Friday noontime. It was the 6th hour. Okay, well, we'll get into that later. All right, but anyway, so Now, what was we talking about there? I lost my train of thought.
Crossing the Kidron.
Yeah, the Kidron. Yeah, but oh yeah, it was about 4.5 hours that he talked to the disciples from chapter 15, 16, and 17. Okay, so that takes us around what, midnight or so. And so I think this is important because we want to remember, here's the Lord Jesus has been up all day. He's been up all night. And then he's going to go through scourges, and I think it's plural. And then he's going to be crucified. And so no wonder they probably had to compel Simon of Cyrene to bear his cross. Does that make sense? I mean, you know, if I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I can't hardly go the next day anyway, myself. So here's the Lord who's been subjected to quite a bit of physical punishment. Okay, the Kidron, another thing about the Kidron that I like to think about, I think I put it in here somewhere. I'm just basically going from memory. I reread this yesterday. God did a pretty good job, I thought. But no. Anyway, the Kidron is where David was fleeing from somebody. He crossed the Kidron to flee from Absalom. You remember that? Remember that story? Where Absalom's trying to take over the kingdom? And so that just kind of stands out, you know, to me. All right, you got any comments? Okay, he went to where there was a garden. A garden. All right, now what is this garden about? Is that where they had some tomatoes and okra and some squash and cucumbers and stuff?
There was olive trees, wasn't there?
Matthew and Mark call it Gethsemane. The word Gethsemane means oil press. So what was the garden about? Does that help you a little bit?
Olive trees.
Okay, they were olive trees and doing what? Making olive oil. Okay, so that was the nature, you know, of the garden. Notice that it says that he entered the garden. See, I don't think most people, y'all know me about word studies, and you know I have a tendency to sort of go overboard. But I think entered is significant. What do you think entered might suggest? To me, it suggests an enclosed area. So he entered this garden. If it's an enclosed area, it might have been a private garden. You think? It could have been owned by one of Jesus' friends. You know, if you think about it. And this is where he regularly went. You remember that? With his disciples to meditate, to pray, to rest. All right, Tommy?
Well, it wasn't quick enough on the draw there, but back up where it says he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kidron. There's a little note there about that word brook from the old 1929 Nelson that says ravine. So that sort of backs up the story earlier about it being dry.
Yeah. Yeah. It literally, I have the Greek word here in my commentary, and I say it's literally a ravine, and by definition, a stream of water that flows abundantly in the winter. That's what.
Greek winter term.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So anyway, that's what it is. Well, since you mentioned that, Tommy, I'll go ahead and read this sentence. It winds its way to the southeast until it finally goes to the Dead Sea. And then I already said this, John probably mentioned it because of its historical significance. And this is where David crossed in his flight from Absalom and Ahithophel. So just think, you know, this is where we are. I mean, this has historical significance, doesn't it? You know, Jesus is crossing the same place where David fled, you know, hundreds of years ago and so on. Okay, now, and Judas who betrayed him also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas knew the place. By the way, here's my comment. It was Celsus, the skeptic, who said of Jesus that he was found attempting to conceal himself and endeavoring to escape in a most disgraceful manner. Now, where did he get that? He didn't get that from the good book, did he? There's nothing in the book that says that. One of the things you want to keep in mind as we study these incredible chapters, I love 18 to 21, I love all of it, of course, I hope you figured that out, is the voluntary nature of Jesus' death. Do you remember earlier, he said he lays down his life for his friends? He says that's voluntary. You know, before Pilate, he's going to say, you wouldn't have any power over me except what? It were given to you from above. I lay it down to myself. I take it up of myself. All of it's voluntary. So everything through this section is voluntary in nature. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priest and a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priest and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. All right, this is a packed verse. First of all, he received a detachment of troops. What do you have in your Bible? Linda, what have you got in the Revised Standard?
Band of soldiers.
Okay, band of soldiers. Anybody else have anything different?
Band of men, officers, and officers.
Okay, band of men. Okay, what are we talking about here? By the way, I got to share this with you. Look here, Miss Linda. I've quit counting on my brethren. Just take it on myself. An elder's wife at Jefferson made that for me. Okay. None of you have the word cohort? You have it in a footnote? Cohort. Okay. A cohort is typically 600 men. Sometimes cohort is used for another word called maniple, and that was 200 men. Okay? So, one thing that we've got going on here are a lot of soldiers. Why were there so many soldiers? We think. Anybody?
For show, maybe.
For show? Maybe.
Make sure he didn't escape.
Why were the soldiers there? Why were there so many soldiers in Jerusalem?
Well, they'd seen
Herod was there.
Oh, do what, huh?
they'd seen his miracles for a lot of them.
Yeah, but there's something else going on.
Feast. There's the feast.
The feast. So how many people are there?
Thousands.
Thousands of people have come in. So every time they had a big deal like that, the Roman troops would come in, the National Guard.
Herod was in town too, so that would have.
Yeah, Herod is there, but now we got the National Guard. I just thought that was kind of funny. I guess you had to be there.
More things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah. And why were they there? So many of them there. This was a time that there would be possible riots and some things like that. People breaking into stores and doing, what do they call that? Flash robbery? What is it? What's it called today? Flash mobs? Okay. Anyway, so the Jews really wanted Jesus captured, right? So my opinion is they took about 200 men. I'm just telling you what the words, mean. So notice next, there were officers. Now who are the officers? These are the temple police. I'm from Mississippi. We always said, the police are coming. Okay. And then the chief priest. Who are the chief priests? Y'all have read your commentaries so closely. It's the reason the church was so happy to purchase them for you. Do we need to take the roll on the basis of who read their assignment? I used to do that at Freed Hardeman, boy. They'd have it read the next time. But I'd mark them unexcused because they didn't read. Or ask a guy to leave one time because he didn't have his assignment up. Anyway, that doesn't apply to us, right? Okay. I kind of wish it did, but anyway. Okay, who are the officers? The officers are probably, no, they're the police. Who are the chief priests? Probably the Sadducees, yes. Oh, I thought you said something. Probably the Sadducees, all right? Because the Sadducees were the ones that predominantly had control of what? The temple. The temple. Is that what you said?
No, I said the Sanhedrin, whatever.
Well, a lot of the members of the Sanhedrin, most of them were from the Sadducees. You want to tell us how many were in the Sanhedrin while you're there?
I don't know what Bill was saying.
Linda, I love you more every day. Okay, 70 members. All right. And then there's another group. So we got the Roman soldiers, we got the temple police, we got the Sadducees, and who else? The Pharisees. And the Pharisees, they were more the religious leaders of the people. They controlled the synagogues and so forth, okay? You know what synagogues are, or it means to come together. So at any rate, now what is my point? My point is you got the whole bunch. You got Roman soldiers, you got temple police, you have Sadducees, you got Pharisees, you got Judas the betrayer. Okay? Anybody want to comment on that?
They definitely wanted to be in control, didn't they?
Yes, very much so. They just used the Romans. You know, Acts 2 when Peter preached, let's see, I'm scanning 22. You men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles, wonders, and signs. You have taken, you, who's the you there? You Jews have taken, and by the hands of lawless men have crucified Jesus. Who's the lawless men? That's the Romans, okay? Now, in one sense, I mean, the Jews are the ones that killed Jesus. But in another sense, we're all responsible, correct? Because he died for what reason? He died for our sins, okay? All right? Okay, now something else on this verse. They had lanterns, torches, and weapons. Now, at this time, there is what is called, let's see, I was going to double check my spelling. They had what is called the Paschal moon. Anybody know anything about that? Boy, I love these things. Sorry. I'm from a family of addiction, so it's a sad story. I like all that stuff. I mean, if I didn't know the Lord, I'd be a glue sniffer in a heartbeat, okay? All right. My dad and my grandpa and all my aunts and uncles, with the exception of one, were drinkers. Thankfully, because of the gospel, my dad quit all that stuff, and then I never took to it. Okay. What about the Paschal moon?
First full moon of the spring.
First full moon of the spring. Scott, give that boy a gold star.
I Googled it.
Well, you still deserve a star because you looked it up. So what is the significance of it, Brother Scott?
They shouldn't have had land.
Right, hang on.
Occurs on or after the fixed date of the ecclesiastical spring equinox on the 21st of March. It is also known as the Paschal full moon and determines the date of Easter.
Well, that's a later thing.
Which falls on the first Sunday following the Paschal full moon, while the term Paschal moon can refer to the astronomical full moon that occurs in April, which is often called a pink moon, which is significantly the ecclesiastical 14th day of the lunar moon.
I'm waiting for something else. It would be very bright. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't say that. So the question arises, why would they need lanterns and torches? See, you ever thought about that? When you dig into this stuff, things like that just surface. So why do they need all those lanterns and torches?
They thought he was gonna hide.
They thought he would be hiding. They thought he would be trying to escape. They thought he would have found a big bush out there, and would have, tried to, find cover. And so they were ready with their torches to be looking in dark corners in places, like that. Okay, but they didn't need this, did they? They didn't need all these lanterns. Okay? So knowing all these things that would come upon him, so Jesus knew all these things? Of course he did. He went forward. Do you see the voluntary nature there of Jesus? He went forward and said, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus said, "I am he." Now you might remember that this expression, "I am of he," I know you don't know Greek, but anyway, this is it, ego eimi. This word right here, epsilon iota mu iota, means I am. This word means I am. Everybody with me now? If you want to say I am, then you stick this in front of it. Like in English, our limitations are what? We got to bold it, or we got to italicize it, or we got to underline it. Pardon? Yeah, we got to put an exclamation mark behind it, Linda says, or something like that. But this is the way you did it. Now, this is not a divine, necessarily, it is not a divine designation. Okay, but it can be. In John 8:58, Jesus says the same thing, Howard, when he says, "Before Abraham was what? I am." See, there it's deity, correct? But when Jesus is walking on the water and they think it's a ghost, remember that? Jesus says, "I am there," but it's phrased, "It is I." So it may just be, "Hey, I'm Jesus." You see? It's used in John chapter 9 with the blind man. When their Pharisees and them are interrogating him, "Are you the guy?" He said, "It is I." Uses the same expression. Okay? But he still gives emphasis to it. I'm the guy. I'm the guy that was blind, and now I see. Do you see what I'm saying? So it gives emphasis to it. So he says, "I am he." And Judas, who betrayed him, stood there. Now what does John leave out that the other writers tell us about?
They backed up, failed them.
No, leave out. What did he leave out?
Yes.
Okay, in the gospel accounts, Judas is said to have saluted Jesus with a kiss. The customary salutation that they would give. All right? John doesn't tell us about that. I don't think I told you this, but 92% of John is not found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. See, John was written in like the last 2 decades, the first century. The other gospel writers are like in the 50s. So perhaps that's the reason we have things like the name of Lazarus in John 11. In John 11, he's not mentioned, in the other gospel accounts. But now Lazarus has been dead for some time. While somebody's living, you don't usually say certain things. But see, Peter's identified in John as the one that cut off Malchus' ear. But Peter's not identified in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But see, Peter's dead by this time. So since he's dead, John felt comfortable, I think, telling about Peter. I had a church history teacher named Earl West, and he wrote his church history. It's an incredible thing, Restoration history, up to about the 50s, and he didn't write past that. And someone asked him one time, "Why is that?" This is what I understood, and he said, "Well, not enough people are dead yet." What do you mean about that? It's kind of like one of the buildings at Freed Hardeman. Some of you, who went to Freed Hardeman here? I know some of you did. Didn't you? Okay. You remember Milan Sitka? They didn't tear down Milan Sitka for a long time because there weren't enough dead people yet. The ones who gave the money to build it. You had to wait till they pass. So you got a similar thing going on, with John mentioning certain things. Okay, when he said this to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Now, two views on this. My job as a teacher, as I see it, is to try to unpack the meaning of words and to try to give some reasonable explanation. So I'm going to give you two explanations. One is this is a miracle. They all fell backwards. Okay? Could be. I personally think it was probably a normal activity. You remember at the cross, a soldier said, truly this is Son of God. Do you remember earlier in John, the police were told to arrest Jesus, and they came back. We hadn't got him. What did they say, Larry? No one ever spoke like this. And so I think what happened when, some of them may not have really ever seen Jesus, but they've heard about him. I mean, the word's out. They're saying to each other, why we got to have 200 guys here to arrest one man? So I think when Jesus, the Bible says he went forward, right? Doesn't it say that? I'm the man. I'm the one you're looking for. And I think they were in such shock, that they kind of, stepped back. And then given the rank of Roman soldiers, I think it had a domino effect. And then they kind of fell backwards. It's just an opinion, though. But it may be a miracle if you want to go that route. Mickey?
Either way, it's a very powerful event.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming that these people with weapons.
It's an amazing, well, it's still off. Maybe it's this one. It's an amazing, it's incredibly significant at this point that they recognize, who Jesus is. Thank you, Mickey.